On this week's Hockey Inside Out, let's all calm down. Let's stay positive. It's early on in the season. Let's not overreact. This week's Hockey Inside Out is brought to you by Madison's New York Grill and Bar in downtown Montreal on Drummond Street, across from the Bell Center. Your home away from home for Habs road games. Okay, on this week's show, we have Stu Cowan from the Montreal Gazette, CBC Daybreak's Jessica Rusnak, and back with us once again is Bruin-loving comedian Joey Elias. Despite beating the Islanders on Tuesday night, the Habs are coming off an 8-game losing streak, which is their longest losing streak since the 1939-40 NHL season. But what's often not talked about is the fact that during that season, the Habs ended up finishing 7th in the league. Granted, there were only 7 teams in the NHL at the time, but I'm more of a glass half full type of guy, so it's really all about perspective. So, keeping that in mind, I'm going to ask the panel to follow my lead and try and stay positive when answering the first question. After this 8-game losing streak, do you think the Canadiens will make the playoffs?
Well, despite the losing streak, they're only a point. They're lucky they're in a division that's struggling. So they're only like a point out of third place and being in a playoff spot. So it's a good year for them to be in a division that has struggled. The problem is a couple of teams that are struggling are Toronto and Tampa, which you figure are going to come on. So they catch a bit of a break. So despite everything that went wrong, they're still in the playoff picture right now, as remarkable as that might seem. We'll see how long they can stay there. As I said, Toronto is right behind them, so it's going to be interesting to see moving forward. I think Marc Bergevin has to do something to help this team, otherwise they're not going to make the playoffs. So it's going to be interesting.
I think it's a little bit funny now how the model is, well, look at the St. Louis Blues last year. They were dead last in January, and they went on to win the Stanley Cup, so anything is possible. Yes, anything is possible in sports, but that was a very unique thing that the St. Louis Blues did. But I think it's going to be difficult for the Canadiens to get themselves in a comfortable spot to get into the playoffs. I think it's going to be similar to last year, where now it's going to be every game counts, and it might come down to the last week of the season, the last game of the season, if they're going to be able to get into the playoffs.
The biggest reason the Blues came back is they found the goalie who could stop the puck. So Carey Price has got to play a lot better than he has if this team has any hope of making the playoffs.
I think they can make the playoffs as long as that they realize that there's a lot of hockey to be played. And that's the thing, is that I was always told that it was by the All-Star break. If you were in the playoffs or the playoff hunt by the All-Star break, that was usually a good sign. We're still a long way from the playoffs, still a long way from the All-Star break. And if, like Stu said, something has to change in the dressing room more than the minor changes that were made this week. But I think, listen, until they're mathematically eliminated, yeah, they're in.
You mean sending Keith Kincaid to Laval doesn't solve everything?
Well,
Start.
Yeah, it's gonna. As I said, it's going to be interesting moving forward. But they got to get help on defense too. I mean, Carey Price, as much as I said he hasn't played well, he hasn't had a lot of help. They can't keep playing Ben Sherrod 30 minutes a game like they did against the Islanders. He played great.
and didn't he play like 29?
29 in Boston,
Yeah.
and Weber played 29. I mean, Sherrod's been a real surprise, a pleasant surprise recently. But I mean, even Claude Julien said that in his post-game news conference. You can't keep playing that guy that long. And Olofsson played 5 minutes that game. So
Well, that's why
they got to do something.
That's why he played those minutes, is because
Exactly.
Olofsson really proved to everybody that he's not NHL ready.
Yeah, and they're going to miss Victor Mete. That's a big injury for them.
There are rumors that Marc Bergevin is out there pursuing Taylor Hall, who is a former first-round draft pick in a left wing. Do you think he'd be a good fit for the Canadiens?
I think he would be, but it goes back to what I was saying. They need help on defense, and you wonder, Taylor Hall's not going to come cheap. As far as what you give up to get him, and as far as what you're going to have to pay him if you want to re-sign him. So it's a bit of a juggling act, but would he fit in? I think he would. Plays a fast-paced game like the Canadiens play. When he goes to the net, he's one of the strongest skaters going hard to the net. I think Taylor Hall would help any team he's on. He's a former Hart Trophy winner, he's an NHL MVP. But again, it's sort of that juggling act. Okay, do you need him more or do you need a defenseman more? I think at this point they need help on defense more than they need help up front. They've shown they can score goals, but no, Taylor Hall would be a good fit on any team. The question is, can you fit him in?
And I'd be curious to see how much New Jersey's going to want from him as well, as New Jersey's probably going to try and rebuild or do something right now. They're not doing very well, so Taylor Hall won't come cheap, depending what Marc Bergevin wants to give away. And he said that he doesn't want to give up the future right now, that it's looking very bright. And I don't know, for a rental player, would it be worth to give up some big players? People, I think, are still upset about the McDonough trade all these years later. So I don't know if Taylor Hall would be able to come here.
I think if you did make a move for him, it would be contingent on that he's confident he can re-sign him. And the Habs are one of the few teams that has salary cap space that they could fit Taylor Hall in here. He's played in the Canadian market before. He's played in Edmonton. He knows what it's all about. So they could fit him in here if they want to. But I mean, Marc Bergevin has got to make that decision on where he wants to improve this team the most.
I don't even think he's going to come here. There's something every time that a big name, what I am happy about, and this may be controversial, I'm just happy they're not chasing a francophone name, just a francophone name. They're now expanding what they're looking for. Did the Montreal Canadiens want a Taylor Hall? Who wouldn't want a Taylor Hall? But I don't see him coming to Montreal.
Well, to anyone who's ever been in Newark, Montreal looks pretty damn good. So
fair enough.
There's that.
And Edmonton too.
But Edmonton, I don't think he knows what it's like to be in a Canadian market, and I think he might be one of those guys that would thrive on the pressure, like Max Domi did last season. He's struggling a bit this year, Max, but I think I think Taylor Hall would like to be in a hockey market where he's used to playing in the spotlight. I think he might miss that playing in New Jersey.
If you had to bet on one thing or another, do you see Marc Bergevin holding on to his prospects, waiting for them to develop, or do you see him making a move and going for a trade?
The key right now is don't panic yet. I mean, I wrote a column this week about firing Claude Julien isn't going to fix the problems. I think Claude Julien's calm and patience and positive attitude through the slump was the reason why they got out of it. They played well the 2 games when they lost to Boston and lost to Philly before they finally ended the slump. And I think it's the same thing. You need let it play out a little bit. As we mentioned earlier, they're still in the playoff picture. You got to figure out it's gonna he's sort of caught in no man's land, Marc Bergevin, because his 2 big guys are Weber and Price, right? And they're nearing the downslide of their career. They're not going to be good that many more years. And then you got all these kids. So, what do you do? Do you go for it now with Weber and Price, or do you get rid of Weber and Price and blow it up and start over? He's sort of caught in a little bit in no man's land right now.
There's about a 10-year discrepancy between.
So it's a tough decision of what he does. I mean, I think for his own job safety, he's got to get in the playoffs. So I think he's got to do something. I think this team, from what they showed last year and how hard they fought, they went through the slump. I think they deserve their GM to give them a better chance to make the playoffs. I think they've shown they can fight. They've shown they can fight back. They went through the slump, but they deserve their GM. They deserve that their GM goes out and does something to help them.
And I think, as you mentioned, the GM wants to keep his job as well, so he has to do something. And it's going to be interesting to see what he's going to be able to do and just maybe how desperate he is, or you might see him maybe make a bigger move than he would have liked to, but it would be, if he doesn't make that move, maybe he's out of a job come the end of the season.
He's just got to make up his mind. Every time you get, the whole week, I feel, up until the game last night against the Islanders, everybody in the city was walking around like they were Marvin the Martian. There was supposed to be a kaboom. Whatever happened to the kaboom? And there was none. So I think Bergevin has to make up his mind right now. Are we going for it now? Are we going for the future? And then just make up your mind and run with it. Don't flip-flop, because that's how you end up in year 8 of a 5-year plan. So make a plan, stick with it, run with it, and the fans have to live with what he decides, if he keeps his job.
It's interesting you say that, because I was talking with Bob Gainey at the captain's ceremony. Before the captain's ceremony, I was asking him about being a GM, and he says, be confident in the decisions you made. The decisions you made, you thought them through, you made them, you were confident in them. Don't panic and change decisions that you put a lot of thought into beforehand. So I think that's the situation. I think that's probably the best advice from Marc Bergevin right now. Nick Suzuki is an amazing hockey player. This kid gets better every game. Kotkaniemi is coming along. There's a lot of pieces on this team that look good. So he's got to, and I think it's good that Bergevin's been in Russia, because he's been away from all this, right? He can sort of clear his mind and figure out what he's going to do. But again, he's got to do something, I think.
Okay. The first half of the show has been brought to you by Madison's New York Grill and Bar in downtown Montreal on Drummond Street. That's the one across the street from the Bell Center. Book your holiday parties and corporate events here now. Okay, despite scoring 28 goals last season, Max Domi has 6 goals so far this season, only 2 goals in his past 15 games. What is wrong with him?
It's a good question. It's almost the Arizona Max has showed up. I think one of the big things is he really misses Andrew Shaw. He misses Andrew Shaw as his line mate. He misses Andrew Shaw as his guy sitting beside him in the locker room. And I think he hasn't been able to find that replacement. He's frustrated. He'll never say he's frustrated. Domi always says everything. He's a positive guy, but he has to be frustrated. I mean, it's just not going for him now. And you wonder, he's got to get out of it. I mean, if the Canadiens want to make the playoffs, they need Max Domi to be a lot better. I'm confident he will get out of it, but he needs to get out of it soon. And they need to find somebody to play with him. They've been juggling lines a little bit. Suzuki, I think, might be a good fit with him. So we'll see, but Max Domi needs to be a lot better. It's a good question, like what happened to the Domi from last season.
Well, I think he's also a player who puts a lot of pressure on himself as well, and that could be it, that, everyone's talking about him being unable to find the back of the net. He knows it, and then maybe it's just that kind of domino effect that he's overthinking things and trying so hard to do something to get out of it. I think he really liked last year how he was able to be one of the guys that they counted on to score goals, especially when they needed it, and not being able to have that role. And he wanted to show consistently. I remember he mentioned this at the start of the season, that last year was not just a one-off, that this is the Max Domi that he's supposed to be. And I think that's probably also frustrating for him as well, that he's going through this stretch and hasn't been able to produce like he usually does.
He's always been a streaky player, in the juniors, in Arizona, and now with Montreal. Two things. One, he finally has a line mate I think he finally feels comfortable with now in Suzuki. But to me, when he got that double minor, something happened to him after that. He hasn't been the same personally. He hasn't been that chirper, the guy who's smiling, who's always cheering. I don't know if maybe he realized he crossed a line for himself or for his teammates or what. But that double minor, if you watch him since then, he's not the same since that game.
And he went almost a quarter of the season without having a penalty.
That's it.
Mm-hmm. Like after last year, I think he was second on the team in penalty minutes. So it's it's. I mean, Max Domi is when you're around him, he's a confident kid, he's a smart kid, he's a talented hockey player. So again, I think he'll get out of it, but he's got to get out of it soon.
The big part of his game is that free-wheeling Max Domi where he's having fun on the ice. He doesn't feel like there's a lot of rules. So to your point, maybe that did affect him in a way that he's a little more cautious.
But again, the fact that he finally has a line mate that it looks like, hopefully, that they keep him and Suzuki together. I don't know who they're going to put on the other side, but it looked like last night they had some good chemistry. Their speed was up. I mean, that kid is going to be outstanding to watch. And I hope, whatever team gets to keep him for his prime, boy, you are in for a treat.
Well, Julien's starting to get some line continuity too. The three Finns together look really good.
Yeah.
That's you got your number one line, the Danault line, and you got the three Finns together. Domi, the fourth line with Nate Thompson and that. So it's sort of things are starting to come together a little bit for this team.
He played a great game last night, I thought.
Who was that?
Thompson.
Thompson, yeah, he was really he was one of their best players through the first month of the season. Went through a little bit of a slide. It's like his body said, "Hey, Nate, you're 35," but now he seems to he's getting back on track.
But boy,
now.
is he key on those faceoffs.
Yeah, he won a big one. I mean, the Weber's goal,
right?
The winning goal. It was
a
clean face-off win by Nate Thompson.
35 or not 35,
yeah,
he knows how to play his role. And he does it well.
Yeah, face-offs are a problem. Max Domi's struggling on face-offs. Nick Suzuki's struggling on face-offs. Kotkaniemi's been up and down. Danault hasn't been as good as he normally is. The only one, I think, was 36% of the face-offs against the Islanders. But you say Nate Thompson, the biggest face-off of the game, he wins it, and they win the game.
At the beginning of the week, backup goalie Keith Kincaid was placed on waivers. They called up Cayden Primeau from Laval. Do you think that was the right move?
I do. I think Kincaid, he was reminding me of Antti Niemi. He wasn't making saves. He was just sort of throwing his body at the puck and hoping it would hit him. And then if it did hit him, he was out of position for the next shot. And it's got to be so difficult to sit on the bench for such long periods and not play. So the game plan is they call up Cayden Primeau. They have 2 back-to-back games coming up. He's going to play one of each of those games. Meanwhile, Kincaid's going to go down to Laval, play a ton down there. They're hoping Kincaid can find his game. You send Primeau back down to Laval with a little taste of what it's like to be in the NHL. You hope Kincaid has found his game. They're not going to have Keith Primeau sit on the bench for
Cayden.
Sorry, Keith Primeau.
Wouldn't that be
Cayden,
something?
thank you for correcting me.
Well, there's the muscle you need.
There you go. Yeah. They're not going to have Cayden Primeau sit on the bench for extended periods as Carey Price is backup. But I think it's good. I think he's a kid who, a 7th-round draft pick, 199th overall, an incredible rise. Give him a little taste of the NHL. Let him see what it's like, and then go back to Laval. He's going to be even hungrier. Once you get that little taste of the NHL, so I think it's good. And some people are worried he's just going to crush his confidence. He gets lit up. I don't think so. I think it's you bring him up, you give him a taste of the NHL, you send him back down, you talk to him, you explain. I'm sure they've talked to him, explained to him what's going on. He has to work with Stefan Waite for a while he's up here. That won't hurt him. So I think it was a good move.
And remember in the preseason when he played the game at the Bell Center, his first taste there, he played a great game. They were chanting Primeau from the crowd. So I think his memories from the Bell Center are definitely a good one, and probably feels good about himself now coming back to the NHL. I'm just a little bit worried about Keith Kincaid, that, what if he goes down to Laval and doesn't find his game there? Because we have to remember last year when he was traded from New Jersey to Columbus, he was the third string goaltender, so he didn't play a lot. So hopefully that's not the case, and then they don't have to go look for another backup goalie if Keith Kincaid can't find his game.
Or you could sort of split it between Primeau and Charlie Lindgren also. They have depth in Laval and goaltending. So
and he took that hard. Lindgren was
he did
very
take it hard.
vocal about not getting the call up. The thing about Primeau coming up, I think that's going to light a fire under Price's arse a little bit, because he sees this kid as
he's what
his
Price
underling.
was back then.
Right. And what's going to happen is one of two things. Either Price becomes Price again, or you're going to have a situation with Primeau like you had with Halak, where all of a sudden he comes in, he plays a great game. You're going to say, well, he made a game-saving saves. Let's play him again. And then he plays again. He wins. You got to ride the hot hand. Now what? Now you're in the same situation. Not a bad situation to be in, considering you went from having one goaltender that's not playing great to a goaltender that you don't trust to, hey, now we have two that we can trust.
And it's been a while since we've had a goaltending controversy here in Montreal, so, why not?
And Kincaid adds another $1.75 million to the Laval Rocket salary, which is probably must be the highest paid team in the AHL.
Okay, that is all for this week's show, which has been brought to you by Madison's New York Grill and Bar in downtown Montreal. That's the one on Drummond Street across from the Bell Center, where you can wait out the traffic and enjoy their $10 specials after every Canadiens game. Okay, after their 8-game losing streak, do you think the Canadiens will make the playoffs, or is it over for them in December? Let us know in the comments section. I'm Adam Susser, and we'll see you back here next Thursday.